Welcome, welcome. Today we are in class here with our awesome PMPs to be who are getting ready to slay the exam. And it is the 22nd of February. And we're just going to take a look very quickly at some questions that we have explored previously, but just trying to put some finality around some of the basic Scrum questions. So I call this Scrum Express. It's a very straightforward set of questions. And it reads, a list of all the requirements the customer wants, even those not worked on, is known as what? So just go ahead, choose an option, and we'll breeze through these pretty quick. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll and let's share the results. Brilliant work. So the answer to this is indeed the product backlog. The product backlog is everything, even those that you have not worked on. It's in the product backlog. All right. Here's the next one. A list of some of the long list requirements, only those to be done in a sprint, is known as what? All righty, 3, 2, and 1. End the poll. Awesome job. The answer to this is indeed the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is a list of some of the long list requirements, those to be done in the sprint. Here's your next one. Next question reads, the product backlog is prioritized and owned by... Three, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll. And the answer to this one, my friends, contrary to what a lot of folks think, the product backlog is owned by the product owner. That's why we call the product owner the chief value officer. It is not owned by the Scrum team. The Scrum team does work on the backlog in many ways as coordinated or facilitated by the product owner. But the real owner of it, who owns the backlog, it's the product owner. That's why the word owner, right? Owned by the owner would make sense, right? So the product owner who owns the backlog. The product backlog should also be prioritized by the product owner, of course, with the help of the team, but who owns it and whose job is this? It's the product owner. All right, here's the next one. The first event of a sprint is... What do we do first in sprint? Okay, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and let's end the poll. All right, and let's share the results. Okay, and the answer to this one, the very first thing you do is you do the sprint planning. So if we go back in a little time machine and we take a look at the sequence of events in a Scrum, what you're going to realize is that the very first thing that happens is the sprint planning. After sprint planning, then you move into having daily scrums, okay? But the best answer to this is sprint planning. It's the very first thing that happens. So just think about it like this. As I always say, try and draw out the Scrum skeleton before your exam. The Scrum skeleton is going to start off with your product backlog, okay? And then your product backlog, you're going to whittle that down into a sprint backlog for the sprint, but that happens within sprint planning. Okay, so where sprint planning happens, that's where your sprint backlog is being derived from your product backlog. And then you go into the actual 24-hour cycles, the sprint. just remember that the sprint is actually a container for all the ceremonies, really. But the first ceremony is sprint planning. Then you have your daily scrum. Then after the daily scrum, you get your PSI, your potentially shippable increment, whatever that may look like. And then your potentially shippable increment, you're going to have your demo. And then you're going to have your retrospective after that. And just remember the informal ceremony that happens in the middle. We have at some point in the middle our backlog refinement ceremony. And that's really it. That is your 3 artifacts, right? Product backlog, sprint backlog, and the PSI. Your 5 ceremonies, you're going to have the sprint planning, the daily scrum, the sprint itself, the demo, the retrospective, and the informal ceremony, backlog refinement that could happen. And just remember your roles: product owner, scrum master, and the developers, or the development team, if you will, or team. You know, sometimes we refer to them as developers, other times we refer to them as development team. But you just need to read through the context of the question and know what is being spoken about. All right, so the first event of the sprint is sprint planning. Just remember, again, we have a container, and in the container, we have everything else. We have the sprint planning, we have the sprint review, we have the sprint retrospective, and we have the daily scrum, all of them happening within the container of the sprint. Okay. So your container is the sprint. And that will help you be able to navigate some of the questions that you face on the test. All right, let's move on to our next one. Next question. The average length of a sprint used in most firms. Just remember, this is talking about best practices in industry or what you've seen to be most common in industry. Okay, it's not talking about what is the limit, it's talking about what is the most common. Remember, we've talked about this quite a few times. All right, what do you think? All right, 3, 2, and 1. And the poll, brilliantly done. The answer is indeed 2 weeks. That's a sweet spot of most firms. Very good. The end result of the sprint is known as what? Now, I don't expect them to give you acronyms on the exam, but you should be able to distinguish which one is fact from this. Go for it. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Let's go ahead and end the poll and let's share the results. Okay, brilliant job. The answer is indeed PSI. Very good. Okay. Let's go to our next one. A daily scrum is what? Choose the best option. Okay. 3, 2, and 1. Very good. We definitely do not want to choose what it is not, right? What it is not a status meeting, it's not a phase gate, and it's not a resolution meeting. We should resolve stuff outside of the daily scrum. So it's more of a planning meeting. Brilliant. You folks are doing really, really well. Okay. Here's our next one. And go ahead and launch the poll. Priming the backlog. I'll let you read it. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and let's share the results. Seems like we all chose something similar. Okay, so the right answer is, of course, backlog refinement. In the past, they used to call this backlog grooming, but because of the negative sound of that word, it was changed to backlog refinement. Very good. All right, let's see what else. The potentially shippable increment should be shown to the customer in a demonstration, known as what? Let's relaunch. Let's go. Very good. Let's end the poll, share the results. The answer is indeed the sprint review ceremony. Well, back in time, I know we used to get a little bit mixed up with the retrospective, but it seems like we've done a very good correction here. Nice. All right. We got another one. The Scrum team should spend time in self-reflection and checking itself for optimization and improvements. This is known as what? Here's your poll. What do you think? Three, two, and one. End the poll and share. Brilliant job. The answer is indeed retrospectives. This has become a cakewalk for you folks. And I'm really excited about that. Okay. One final question before we jump into something else. Let's go ahead and relaunch the poll. A sprint is what? Brilliant. It is indeed a time box. It's a time box that we fit whatever scope we can into. Well, brilliant job. Very, very nice. I'm very excited we did so well in this. And now it's time for us to move to something else. Thank you very much. For those of you that are not on the program, hey, go on down to projectmanagementmasterclass.com, take a look at the options we have and join us for a journey where we not only cover this, but we also cover a lot of predictive stuff. Okay? See you soon.